evening, everybody, and welcome to Grace, Liberty, the Finished Work of Jesus Christ. All right, listen, we're going to continue our series today on the faith without works is dead and what this truly means. So far, we've done a few different episodes on this, and it's building up to a head. Okay, we're going to jump forward quite a bit. Actually, we're going to jump over to James chapter 2, because in a few verses into James chapter 2 is where we find the start of faith without works being dead. It's a passage, that's about 10 to 12 verses long that explains it. However, we're building a context. So, up till now, we've hit key verses in James leading up to this point. And so I want to continue. I want to continue on, because not only in the process are we seeing a context develop, we're also seeing that James is not the religious book that everybody thinks it is. It's not a works-based book. It's not, what everybody says it is. It's actually truly about grace and love. And so we're going to continue on with that. We're going to start with James chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. My brethren, have not the faith of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with respect of persons. For if there come unto your assembly a man with a gold ring, in goodly apparel, and there come also a poor man in vile raiment, and ye have respect to him that wears the gay clothing, and say unto him, Sit thou here in a good place, and say to the poor, Stand thou there, or sit here under my footstool, are you not then partial in yourselves, and are become judges of evil thoughts? Okay, so what we want to look at here, the Greek word for faith. And this means simply to be persuaded. We've said it a few times in our series. I think I've mentioned it quite a few times in some of my other messages. It simply means to be persuaded. And so the term respect of persons means partiality towards something, or towards a certain people. It's real simple, showing partiality, or how else do I put it? Preferring one over another, not being objective, I guess is the best way to put it. If you read it in modern English, you're going to say, well, I'm not supposed to respect people. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is don't be partial. Don't have preferences. Be objective. All right? And so now the examples we see being used in the following verses, the verses that follow verse 1, are explaining his point. And it's that of a rich man and a poor person. Right? People think, and used to think back then, and a lot of times nowadays, people who look right, people who act right, and in this case, people who are rich, are blessed by God, and are more spiritual. And this is absolutely positively not the truth. There are also, of course, people who think vice versa, that the poorer you are, the more spiritual you are, and that is also not true. Okay, this is an example only. It is not the only way that we should not be partial. Okay, so in other words, these people are taking rich folks and saying, you know what, you're really cool, you're really spiritual, and hey, you have a lot of money to contribute to our church, so we're going to give you, the best and treat you the best. Okay, but everybody should be treated the same. And that's James's point. And the reason why that we bring this up is, again, we're building a context. So far in the series, we've seen a lot of examples, and James, up to this point, is basically saying, don't be a jerk. You have the liberty to do what you want and be what you want. And you can be a jerk if you want. But, hey, don't be a dick. Really. Don't be a jerk. But don't go and advertise either. Because what happens a lot of times is people get involved in churches, or churches do certain things, and the reason why they do it is to look spiritual, to be cool, or to prove something to themselves, or think they're earning something. It's hey, look at me, I'm spiritual. Yeah. You know what? Just go about and do it in your daily life. And that's really what it's about. You don't need to go hunt down people to help. You don't need to go find things to do. Just go about your life. If something happens, God put somebody in your way, do it. Take care of it. Love them. Whatever. You know, whatever it means. But don't give the Christian responses. Well, you come to church, you have to come to church with me. Or if you don't come to church, you know, I can't help you. Or, I'm late for church, sorry, I can't help you out. I mean, how many times people do that? Well, I'll pray for you. Or, well, you know what, why don't you come to church, you know, and we'll see what happens from there. Please. 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 The only time Jesus ever entered into a synagogue was to rebuke people. Same thing with Paul. So I don't want to hear it. All right, but this is what he's talking about. Right? Not being partial, not treating people different. And people tend to look at people who are involved in the church. People tend to look at people who are in, you know, places of honor and authority. Deacons, elders, pastors, whatever. Or people who lead outreaches. Or people who are doing good things. And they have a very clean life. And they're very spiritual. And they're very holy. And they read their Bible all the time. And they never miss church. And they treat them different. They treat them better. Like somehow they've earned something. But that's not grace. And that's what James is talking about. That's not grace. Because you can't earn anything. It was already paid for. There's nothing to earn. Everything was already paid for on the cross. So what's the point in treating people any different? Now, let's move on. Okay? Now we're going to move on to verse 6. Verse 6. But ye have despised the poor. Do not the rich men oppress you and draw you before the judgment seats? All right. Despised means to treat shameful or to mistreat. Poor in Greek is one who has fallen from a better estate, one who is poor, helpless, and needs lifting. It's important to see that James is not putting any requirements on them. You know, they don't have to do anything. He's not saying you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, you need to treat people better, you need to be nice, you have to be good, you have to love people. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying you have to go out and love people. You have to not be a jerk. No, you can be a jerk if you want. You can be a dickhead. He's just saying don't. You know, you said you're saying you're a prick if you do. He's not saying feeding the poor is evidence of salvation or that you're somehow more holy. It's not required for salvation. This is never, ever mentioned in this verse or any other verse. Salvation doesn't even come up. You know, and all these people who talk about James and, you know, and faith without works being dead, being somehow some kind of evidence for salvation, it's not even there. The word salvation and saved in deliverance in any way is not mentioned. That's not what he's saying. It has no bearing on on this conversation at all. Yet people make it all about that, and the church has done this for hundreds of years. And James is addressing people being jerks. You know, they are uncaring, they're selfish, and they're religious. And their religion has kept them from caring and helping others in need. Instead, they focus on religion. Now, in this case, you know, these are Jewish believers that he's talking to. So keeping festivals, doing the right thing, doing the holy thing. But again, you know, what James is saying is that people are being mistreated. People are being treated like jerks in the name of religion. Yeah, I'll say it now, and I'll probably say it again by the conclusion. But I don't know that there's ever been a pastor, and maybe there has, I'm sure there's been one somewhere, who, you know, is driving on his way to church to preach, calls up somebody and says, hey, I can't make the church, or somebody needs help. Some poor guy on the road. Or I ran across somebody that needs my help. Or somebody who says, you know what, I'm going to miss church today. I know I'm running late for church, but this guy needs my help. But it doesn't happen. And if it does, it's not very often. They put, religious activities and outreaches and ministries and preaching and teaching and all these things, because it's the so-called spiritual thing to do. And, I'm going to pray for you. And they put all these things, put being morally good above everything else. And it's dead. There's not an action, there's not a ministry or a church or an outreach, that is ever going to, produce anything in your life. It's not that, it's the Holy Spirit. In Galatians 6:9, I've talked about it a lot, and I'm going to talk about it again. It says that things done in the flesh produce corruption, things done in the Spirit produce life. It has nothing to do with what specific things you're doing. Going to church doesn't produce life. Letting God do what God's going to do produces life. I can be preaching, teaching, praying, and going to church, and it's corrupt simply because it's done in the flesh, simply because it's a religious action. Or I could be sitting on the toilet taking a crap and changing lives because it's done in the Spirit. And don't think that's a far-fetched example. A lot of my posts, a lot of my articles, a lot of the things that I study and do are done on the toilet. I know that's not something you probably want to hear, but you're missing the point. Now, these people, in most of Christianity nowadays, puts more importance on being at church, speaking to a crowd, or praying publicly than they do helping a brother in need. They put morality and Christian lifestyle, again, Christian lifestyles, ahead of loving and caring because they're afraid to get their hands dirty. They're afraid to associate with certain people. My goodness. Please. You know what? Give me a break. James is not a religious book. It's not a works-based book. He's not even saying, he's saying completely the opposite. He's saying, don't let your so-called Christian works and your religion get in the way of just, caring about people and loving people. Because that is what Jesus did. And Jesus didn't go to church. Jesus didn't go to synagogue except to rebuke people. Jesus wasn't afraid of who he was hanging out with or who he invited to hang out with him. And just the way Jesus didn't go hunting for people. I mean, in some senses, he was out kind of looking. But he didn't, set up a formal outreach, canvass an area. He ran across people. People came to him. They came to him because they knew who he was. And if you manifest Christ, if you just love people and care for them, don't judge them and condemn them and hold them to some kind of moral standards, then you'll be surprised. People will come to you. If they got a problem, there's somebody to talk to. Or they need help. People will come. How many times did people come running to Jesus because they heard of who he was? They knew who he was. And this is the context of James. And we are very, very, very close, my friends, to getting to the first part of faith without works being dead. All right. I'm going to go to verse 10. For whoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point is he guilty of all. Keep in Greek is wall or part of a house or a fortification. Offend means to trip up, to err, or to fail. Guilty means to be liable or guilty. You see, James would not have to write any of this if it wasn't happening. If there were not people who needed to be addressed on this subject. In other words, there are people who believe that their degree of morality in doing Christian things makes them better than others, or in better standing with God, or in good standing with God, or that they're blessed. I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it, and people who watch this video, and people who see me here saying on Facebook, there'll be somebody out there that hates it. There is no work, obedience, or standard that is associated with the receiving a blessing. You are blessed based upon the righteousness of Christ, because it's all paid for. The difference is, am I believing it? Am I taking the blessing that God's trying to give to me? Whatever that may be. Or am I, what is my view of God? And I've said it before, Ephesians 2:8, that says, for we are saved by grace through faith, not of works, that any man may boast, going into verse 9. If you read it in the original Greek, literally means deliverance and victory comes by being persuaded of the grace of God. It's not necessarily solely or even at all talking about eternal salvation. You see what I'm saying? And so, I'm not saying go out and be immoral and run around doing stupid stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I get accused of that all the time. I have people, send me personal messages on my Facebook, accusing me of these types of things. And I don't care. I'm not here to please people. I'm here to tell them the truth. And what people need to hear. And what people need to hear is not a list of things they should or shouldn't do. What people need to hear is not they're on their way to hell. Although that's a reality, and if it has to come up, it has to come up. But that's not what people need. That they need to live up to some standard. Well, you're saved by grace, but once you're saved, no. What people need to know is that there is a God. And that He loves them and died for them, no matter what they do. And they have the freedom to be who they want to be and who they are. That's what people need to hear. And it's Jesus Christ. If something is done like helping others in need, it is better be done as a part of your life, like I said. Not downing and slamming and putting down people who do good things. I'm not, putting down churches who have ministries and stuff like this. The problem is, these things are usually, to make us feel good. Usually to make us look holy. Usually so the church looks like it's doing something. Because it's our mission. No. Like I said, these things are better off done as just part of my life. I run across a homeless person, I'm going to help them out. You guys have seen, hopefully, in one of my previous messages that, I gave you a few examples of things to do to help people. I carry a bag around with me that has, some food in it. And now I put a pair of shorts because it's summertime, and in case a homeless guy needs something to wear. Or if I happen to be driving down the road and there's somebody there, I can give them. But I'm not hunting them down. I'm not against people who do those sort of things. But why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? The worst thing that ever happened to one of my outreaches was when the church got involved. I spent at least a year or two doing this, particular outreach, reaching out to poor and homeless people. With very, very few people knowing that I was even doing it. And it was successful. It changed lives. It wasn't big in numbers. but lives are changed, including mine. The second the church found out and gotten involved, it became superficial. And the impact inwardly was not nearly the same. So, that's just an example. But this is what he's talking about. And again, we're talking about faith without works being dead. We're building a context. And so, true love is not religious. True love is Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ isn't a religion. He's a person. He's God. All right, we're going to go now to verses 12 and 13. So speak ye, and do so, as they that should be judged by the law of liberty. For we shall have judgment without mercy. He shall have judgment without mercy, that has shown no mercy. Mercy rejoices against judgment. Bam. Mercy. Liberty. But James is a book about religion. James is a book about good works. James is about, proving your salvation and proving that you're spiritual and that you got faith. Really? I'm going to read that again. Law of liberty. Mercy. Rejoicing against judgment. My friends, James is not what people think it is. Faith without works is not what people think it is. And there's the more I study the finished work, the more my heart breaks for Christianity nowadays. The more my heart breaks for the thousands and millions of people in bondage. And so let's go through this verse. Verse 12. Judged, to separate, to divide, to try in a judgment, in a judgmental manner, to come to a decision. Liberty, independence from legal restrictions and rules of life. Freedom. In other words, do what the hell you want. People don't like to hear that. They think, it's not Christianity. That's not true. You know what Christianity is nowadays? You watch what people say about Christianity on TV, in the news, or anytime something happens. Christianity is, we don't like gay people, or I don't believe in homosexuality. Shut the hell up. If that is how you define yourself being a Christian, because these things come from Christians, from interviews from Christians. If that's how you define being a Christian, by what you do and what you don't do, what you think is right, what you think is wrong, then you're missing the boat, baby. You don't know Jesus. You know religion. So please stop calling yourself a Christian. Oh, you know what? Call yourself a Christian. You can call yourself whatever you want. You dig? All right. Liberty. People don't like hearing the fact that the word liberty means independence, freedom from any restrictions. Free. Why? Well, let's look at it this way. If my electric bill is paid off for my entire life, no matter how much I use, it's all paid off. Why can't I use as much electricity as I want? Should I? Maybe at times. Maybe at times I shouldn't. That's not the point. Doesn't mean I can't. There's no legal action that's going to be taken against me. It's all paid. Just like my sin is all paid, my failures are all paid. There's nothing holding me back and putting me in bondage to some religious works system, some standard I have to meet up to, some lifestyle that's somehow Christian. I can do what the hell I want. Does it mean everything's beneficial? No, of course not. But God ain't judging me, and God ain't punishing me, and He ain't disciplining me. It goes back to Galatians 6, 7 and 8. Things done in the flesh are corrupt. It doesn't say if you do something in the flesh, God's judging your ass. All right, so let's move on. Verse 13. Judgment. Again, a separation or a sentence. Without mercy means unmerciful. Has showed to endow a person with a certain quality. Mercy is something that is extended for the alleviation of the consequences of sin. Rejoice against, glory, or boast. Basically, what's being said is that we are to live in liberty and freedom and allow others to do so as well. Oftentimes what happens is because I find myself falling in the same trap a lot. We have liberty and forgiveness and grace for ourselves, but we deny it to others. Somehow they're wicked for doing the things that they do. I can tell you, some of the stuff that I do or have done, would cause major judgment. Probably the worst sinner you're going to find in anybody you know. But hey, I'm saved by grace. God's working in my life, and He's working through my life. Not because I'm morally good, and not because I'm like some, religious freak and do the right things. All right, so back to what we're talking about. We have the freedom to be and do what we want because of the cross of Christ, and so do others.